Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be making some positive announcements about easing of restrictions in New South Wales, but we do so with caution. As we know, the vaccine rollout's only just commenced in New South Wales, and there'll be some months before any significant amount of the population has access to the vaccine. But also we know that we can't let our guard down. Even though we're easing restrictions, it's more important than ever before to make sure we're checking in when we go to venues, keeping our social distance, getting tested if we have the mildest of symptoms, and making sure we follow all the other rules to keep ourselves safe and also those closest to us safe as well. I also want to stress and thank the number of people that are coming forward to testing. We're seeing an increase on the week previously on the number of people coming forward and getting tested, and that's good news. It means all of us are on our watch, on our guard, and all of us are continuing to be vigilant against this pandemic or this virus. In relation to New South Wales, from Friday, so from after 1 minute past midnight on Friday morning, you'll be able to welcome 50 people into your home instead of 30. But please know that this comes with risk. Make sure nobody comes into your house with symptoms that hasn't been tested and been told they can leave their house. Make sure there's good ventilation, good distancing. Please be careful if you are taking up this opportunity. You can have 50 people at your house, but you need to do so with caution, and you need to make sure that everybody is following the COVID rules. In relation to weddings, you can now have 30 people on the dance floor at any one time, and it doesn't have to be the same 30 people. So essentially, each of your guests will be able to have a dance, but it has to be only 30 at a time. And that is to make sure that we, again, reduce the risk of super spreading events, but we also acknowledge that industry has been hit hard, and we also appreciate what an important day it is for those who are getting married during this time. So you can have 30 on the dance floor at any given time. It doesn't have to be the same 30, and we ask everybody to please respect that. In relation to weddings also, if things continue to go well, we will reevaluate the cap. Currently there's a 300 cap on weddings, and we're even looking to ease that in 3 weeks or so if things continue the same way. So that's positive news for that industry. But in the meantime, everybody at your event, at your wedding, can dance, but only 30 at a time, and we ask everybody again to respect that. In relation to being able to standing up and having a drink, at the moment you can do that outside venues, you can't do it indoors, but from March 17, if everything goes well, in 3 weeks' time, you'll be able to stand up and have a drink indoors as well as outdoors, and that again is a positive move. For gyms, you'll be able to have up to 50 in a class, so long as they are subject to the 4 square metre rule. So unlike other venues, gyms are still at 4 square metres, but you can have up to 50 in a class rather than 30, which exists now. Now, in relation to singers or performers, we've previously said the limit was 5 indoors. It's now gone up to 30. So whether it's a choir at a place of worship or whether it's a choir at another venue, you can have up to 30 people performing or singing. And if congregations want to sing, everybody will have to wear a mask, and they'll have to go back to the 4 square metre rule. So at the moment, places of worship are the 2 square metre rule, but if congregations want to engage in singing, they can, but we ask that everybody wear a mask and adhere to the 4 square metre rule. So as you see, these are a combination of very positive easing of restrictions. We're nearly there in terms of what burdens we're imposing on the community, but we're also at a critical stage in the pandemic. The vaccine rollout is starting, and we're confident that people will take up the opportunity for the vaccine. But in the meantime, we have to be as vigilant as ever. We have to make sure we don't get complacent. We stick to the COVID restrictions and the rules to make sure all of us stay protected. Now, the New South Wales government won't be in a habit of announcing our daily numbers for how many people are vaccinated, but given we've had 2 days already and this is day 3, I want to provide some positive assurance to the community. In the first 2 days to 6 o'clock last night, we had more than 3,200 people vaccinated, which is a wonderful effort in just 48 hours, and that's only in the 3 state-run hospitals. I want to thank everybody involved, including the people who've put up their hand to get the jab, and every day we get booking numbers for the next day and the next day, and so far there is enormous enthusiasm and positivity around people receiving the vaccine and those administering the vaccine. And I just want to thank New South Wales Health for being so efficient, for being so diligent, and all that practice, all that preparation that we were able to do. even though we didn't know what day the vaccine would be arriving until it arrived. I just want to commend everybody in New South Wales Health for that mammoth task. In just 2 days, we've seen more than 3,200 people get the vaccine, and of course the rollout continues. Very positive news, and I do encourage everybody to take up the opportunity for getting the vaccine. As I've said, I'll be getting the AstraZeneca one as soon as it's made available to demonstrate to the community that that is as good as the Pfizer vaccine, and that most of us will be offered the AstraZeneca vaccine when it's made available. Dr. Chant will now give her official medical report, and then Ministers Hazzard in Health, Minister Hazzard will comment, and then of course the easing of restrictions today has a huge positive impact on our economy, and the Treasurer, Dominic Perrottet, will outline what this means for our economy, but also what it means in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. So New South Wales recorded no locally acquired cases of COVID in the last 24 hours, and 1 case was overseas acquired, bringing the total number of cases since the pandemic began to 4,966. As the Premier has indicated, it's pleasing to see those testing rates remain high, and we had 17,917 tests in that 8 p.m. to last night period. The previous day's total was 10,177. I would like to say that with the easing of the restrictions, I just would urge the community to maintain their vigilance, particularly urge you to continue to do that QR check-in. We don't know at what point, whilst we're putting in incredible protections at our borders and rolling out vaccine to our border workers and quarantine workers as the highest priority, the risk of an event where we get that transmission is still ever present whilst we have virus circulating in the world. And we are receiving overseas travellers, we're receiving freight and ports that are so essential for our existence. So please continue to take those preventative actions even though you see those 0 cases every day. It really is very much an assurance, should we have a case occurring, that we can rapidly respond. And also, please continue to practice those common sense measures of stay at home if you're unwell, if you've got COVID symptoms, get tested, maintain that good hand hygiene. And I would actually encourage us to say that throughout 2021 and beyond, we're going to need to adopt and maintain some of these measures. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kerry. I also would just like to thank the New South Wales Health staff. I visited Liverpool Hospital, Westmead Hospital and of course RPA, and saw literally hundreds of doctors and nurses lined up ready to receive their jab. Many of those doctors and nurses had come straight out of operating theatres and intensive care units, and they were confident to have the jab. My message to the community is when it's your turn, you should be confident to have the jab. Certainly each one of those doctors and nurses who are receiving the vaccination were excited, were actually overawed at the opportunity to have the vaccination. When I hear the continuing discussions in the community from some that they're not going to have the jab, can I say to you, think about the fact that you're not only putting yourself at risk, your family at risk, your community at risk, but you're also putting those frontline health workers at risk by not actually taking part in our vaccination program. So I would strongly encourage you to do that. I also just want to add one further thing. New South Wales is opening up more and more, but as we do that, people cannot be complacent. The complacency issue has been an issue right from the word go, but as we open up, we know that more and more people are thinking that it's all over. It isn't over. 500,000 people have died in the United States, many more across the world, and we still have people coming in from those parts of the world that are extremely dangerous. We happen to be very, very successful in Australia in managing the issue, but that doesn't mean that we can all just forget about the fact that we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. Take it seriously and make sure that as you do have the opportunities that New South Wales Health and the government are now giving to us all in terms of more freedoms, that we try and maintain some common sense. You don't need to be closer than the 1.5 metres generally. Try and maintain that distance from others. Still go and get tested if you have any symptoms at all. If you're not getting tested when we have symptoms, you're putting everybody at risk, not only yourself. And of course, don't forget the hand hygiene messages. And on that final note, I want to say thank you to the broader community. Most people are still complying, but complacency just isn't. There's no space. There's no room for complacency. Take it seriously.
Thank you, Brad. Well, today's a great day where we're easing restrictions again in New South Wales, and that's been off the back, I think, of our state certainly leading the way. The easing of these restrictions, I think, very much gets us back to normal, and with the ones that will be coming in the next few weeks as well, I think that is a great result based on the very strong health response. And as the Premier and the Minister and Kerry Chant have pointed out, it's not just from the government, it's been the team effort right across our state, and continuing to use QR codes and complying ensures that gives confidence to health that we can continue to open up all aspects of our economy. Tomorrow we'll be releasing the half-yearly review here in New South Wales, and I think if you look back at where we were 12 months ago, New South Wales is in incredibly positive shape, and that's because of the investments that we've made in our health teams. Our tracking and tracing teams have ensured that we've been able to lift restrictions. But particularly the ones today, if you still look across the board, we're having an economic impact of around $1.5 billion a month. That is mainly on the back of international borders being closed. But from within New South Wales, these restrictions don't just help the New South Wales economy to the tune of a couple of $100 million a month, but particularly get society back to normal. That increases business confidence, that increases consumer confidence, and that's an incredibly positive thing. The last thing I want to say about today's restrictions that are being eased is that it's been a very difficult time over the last 12 months for the wedding industry, but more particularly for those wanting to get married in New South Wales. So for the brides and grooms out there, many have postponed their weddings during this period of time, and today's announcement will ensure that those events that many people have made enormous sacrifices, families right across our state, can enjoy, get together and celebrate their wedding. It's been a very positive thing, and they are a group of people particularly who have made an enormous sacrifice. And I want to thank the industry, the brides and grooms who have been in touch during this period of time. Thank them for the respectful way they've gone through this period of time, but for the sacrifices they have made for the people of our state.
With cinemas increasing to 100% capacity, will other entertainment facilities indoors, like theatres, have to stay for 75%?
Yeah, we're considering those options at the moment. Theatres obviously have a variety of the way in which they operate, but please know that for major events like Hamilton and others, there have been exceptions sought from health, and health has given those exemptions. So for major events in theatres at the moment, there are those exemptions which allow 100%. We are looking at the policy generally as well, and we are hopeful that in the future we will be able to have 100% for all those events as well. Obviously in a cinema it's not interactive, you're not talking or singing, you're just sitting in your chair, so it's obviously lower risk than other events which might have more interaction.
You previously said that dancing is one of the more high-risk activities. Now, well, from Friday, up to 30 people at a time will be allowed to dance at a wedding, not just a bridal party, but the cap is still 300 people. Why specifically have you kept the cap at 300 people whilst allowing this dancing?
Because if there's a super spreading event, even though you're only allowing dancing 30 at a time, that reduces your risk of spreading the disease. But at least we know until everybody is vaccinated in and around the quarantine system, which is still a risk to us, at least in the next 3 weeks, we'll be able to say to people, we're keeping the cap in place to make sure that if there is a super spreading event, no more than 300 people will be exposed to the virus at one venue. And weddings tend to be events where people know each other, it's highly emotional and people do interact. So we're making sure that until the end of the next 3 weeks, when we hope that all of our hotel quarantine workers and our high-risk health officials who are dealing with people potentially with COVID every day are vaccinated, we need to be extra cautious, and this is based on the health advice. But we also appreciate that if you're going to book a wedding with more than 300 people, it's not going to happen in the next 3 weeks. So it's not going to affect bookings. In fact, what we're doing today is sending out a strong message to say that you'll now be having greater freedoms for those of you who are going to have a special event in the next little while. But those who are thinking of booking can book with more confidence, knowing full well the direction in which New South Wales is going. And that's what we've always aimed to do, provide that certainty, provide that knowledge, provide that guarantee and assurance about what our policy position is. And of course, at all times, we don't want to create additional stress on our citizens, quite the opposite. But I think we can say that New South Wales is in a very good position at the moment, but we know that that is very volatile. And once we reduce the risk on our quarantine system by ensuring everybody in and around that system is vaccinated, and that's not just the first shot. Obviously, you need 2 jabs of Pfizer. You need the first shot now and then the second shot in 3 weeks' time. So at the end of that period, we'll have much more confidence that we'll reduce the risk of the virus getting out to the community. And that's the logic based on the health advice that's determining our decisions.
Regarding weddings, Premier, we've had a call from a listener just in regards to how they actually work with the indoor drinking standing up. With hors d'oeuvres, canapes and so forth, can a waiter actually pass them around on a tray, or do they still need to be delivered in a box?
Oh, well, that's a very specific question. But obviously from the 17th of March, you'll be able to stand up in all indoor venues. So from the 17th of March, you will be able to stand up so long as you're ensuring all the other COVID rules, social distancing, QR codes, all those things. So obviously you'll be able to attend an indoor facility from the 17th of March and enjoy that hospitality standing up. But until that time, we're still recommending that indoor activity be seated.
Will those caps on weddings and funerals lift in 3 weeks' time if the current trend continues?
Well, potentially yes. Yeah, potentially yes.
And still some uncertainty though, Premier.
No, quite the opposite. We've said that if current trends continue, we will be looking at lifting those caps.
Are you giving a guarantee for a vertical?
Because it's different. It's different because at the moment those larger venues have different measures in place to what other events will have. And we've based all this on the health advice. And again, we're sending a very strong message to the community that if things continue the way they are, obviously we've already taken the decision that you'll be able to have a drink inside standing up from the 17th of March unless something happens. And in relation to other caps, we're obviously looking to ease those restrictions as well if things continue the way they are.
When's the last time anyone was issued a PIN for breaching these?
We had one in the last week. So we do have, I get updates on how many infringement notices have been issued. But I do want to stress, and this was a discussion we had this morning, we are going to increase compliance because we've noticed now that people are not as enthusiastic about, or they're forgetting to sign in when they go into a venue, and businesses aren't, some businesses, I shouldn't say all, but some businesses aren't as enthusiastic about having the signage around about the QR codes and insisting on that. So,
leaving the signing issue aside, though, like with groups of people standing up at bars, if we haven't had community transmission, does it really matter?
Well, at the moment, what we are really making sure we do is reduce the risk of a super spreading event. So remember, we didn't have community transmission before Northern Beaches either, but it snuck out of the quarantine system, and that's our biggest risk. So once people in the quarantine system are vaccinated, that reduces the risk of the virus getting out, which is why the timing is so critical for us. Because the biggest risk to New South Wales and the nation, frankly, of community transmission is the quarantine system. And once everybody in and around that system is vaccinated, well, obviously the risk is massively reduced. And that's why we're easing restrictions accordingly to that.
Premier, you'd be across the stuff up this morning that's been revealed.
Only by what I've read,
yes.
yeah.
The same company that provides those services to the aged care homes in Queensland is also looking after the rollout of vaccines in aged care homes in New South Wales. Whilst it's falling under Commonwealth responsibility, these are people in New South Wales. Do you have any concerns with the company doing the rollout here in New South Wales? Well,
look, I'm sure the federal government will do their due diligence to make sure that they are checking on those things. And, you know, we are going to have, unfortunately, these hiccups along the way, and I'm sure the Commonwealth, the federal government, will investigate the matter and do due diligence across the nation.
But is it a setback to the PR campaign to get,
well,
people vaccinated?
I can only comment on what we're responsible for in New South Wales, and I'm buoyed by what we've seen in the last 48 hours. So if you're a New South Wales resident, you should feel very confident about getting the vaccine, making sure that it protects you and your family, your loved ones. And look, there's always going to be things that don't go according to plan, and I think what happened today is not good. But obviously the Commonwealth, the federal government will look at those matters.
Information from the federal government as to what nursing homes are being vaccinated on what days, because we're hearing stories from homes all across Sydney that are having them cancelled at the last minute.
Well,
that puts a lot of stress on.
Well, can I say that I have asked our health officials to try and get that information to me.
And ultimately it falls back on the New South Wales Health Department if something does go wrong, because they go into our hospitals.
Well, obviously, New South Wales is always proactive in supporting our citizens, and we have asked for that information.
Do you need more information from the feds, though, about exactly?
I've just made that comment.
And in regards to the vaccine, New South Wales administering of the vaccine, why are you going to be telling us how many people are getting the jab each day?
Because the pandemic, because we're likely to be living with COVID for years.
Can you tell us how many cases we've got?
Exactly, and also because we don't control all the data for that. We only control what happens in New South Wales facilities. So as I want to make this point very clear because it's important. When the AstraZeneca vaccine becomes available to large numbers in our population, people will be ringing or getting that through their GP network, which the federal government is responsible for collecting the data. So we can only comment on what facilities or what vaccine is, and so I don't think it's helpful to the community to have part of the picture. So what we'll do now is, because it's early days, and I'm so pleased with how the rollout is going in New South Wales, that I'm sharing this information to make sure people are confident that not only has New South Wales Health and everybody supporting health in relation to the vaccine done an exemplary job, but it augurs well for us in terms of mass vaccinations moving forward. But I want to be clear that there'll come a point in time when the New South Wales government doesn't have all the information. It will come to us through the Commonwealth. And that's why we won't be in a position to give an accurate number, and I want to make that very clear. That's the only reason. We're very open and transparent. If at any time we're asked, of course we'll provide that information. If at any time we're asked, we'll provide that information, but I don't think it's useful giving the community part of the picture at this stage. However, given its early days, in terms of what's happening in New South Wales hospitals, we're more than happy to share that information, as we will do continuously. But there'll come a point in time where more vaccinations will be occurring outside the New South Wales system. And at that point in time, it will mean little to give those numbers out to the community.
Premier, you've acknowledged that quarantine is the biggest danger, which makes sense because there's nothing locally transmitted. And I'm not seeking to get the sort of answer where you're undermining what is currently in process, but is any refinement needed to the quarantine process? Is it as strong as you would want it to be, or is there something more, do you think, that extra layer of security?
Look, I don't know if that's a leading question and you know something I don't, but can I say that our health experts, our police, and other senior government agencies on an ongoing basis review how we can make the system tighter and stronger. Every day that we provide that system, we believe it's the strongest it can be, but we're always open to tweaking, to improving. Whenever there's a breach around Australia or around the world, we actually learn from that. We make sure we're checking everything we're doing every day. But there's no doubt the biggest challenge for us in the next 3 weeks is making sure that everybody working in and around the system is as vigilant as ever. Because you have the vaccine doesn't mean you can relax on PPE, on all the procedures we've put in place. That is the biggest risk for us, if I can be honest. And that's why we've asked New South Wales Health, which they've done, to make sure we have strong messaging for people who do have the vaccine already, who've received the vaccine, to say this doesn't mean you have to be any less vigilant, quite the opposite. We're welcoming home 3,000 Australians every week through Sydney Airport. We're bringing in more planes with freight, including the vaccine. New South Wales is by far the largest operational port, or Sydney Airport is the largest operational port at this point in time in the nation. And we're doing our bit, but it also means all of our workers have to be as vigilant. But it also means New South Wales Health and Police will continue to work with the federal agencies to make the system as tight as possible. And if we do need to make tweaks, if we get advice to change things, of course we'll do that as well.
Premier, how is seeing at churches going to work? So a 400 square metre church can have 200 parishioners for a service, but if they want to sing a hymn, they have to kick 100 parishioners out.
Well, that's up to every place of worship to determine. They'll be able to have a choir of 30 people now. So, look, this is about choices as well. We give you the best health advice. We tell you what's in the public health orders, and then we leave it to our community, our organisations, to give instructions as they see fit. What we're doing is trying to keep, or what we are doing, I should be more stronger in my language, ensuring we keep the community as safe as possible, especially as the vaccine rollout continues. And if there are ways in which people want to work within those health orders for their organisation, that's a matter for them. We won't be imposing certain obligations unless we have to, but I also think it's an issue of people. That's why you can't make one rule for every single organisation. You need to leave a bit of space for them to present to their, whether it's a parishioner or whether it's another organisation, what their best advice is to their people.
Last few questions, please.
Can I ask Mr Hazzard, just on the aged care thing, I know the Premier's quite diplomatic, you may less so, but are you happy with that? Are you happy with the information the federal government has passed on about where these vaccinations are being rolled out in New South Wales nursing homes?
I think the federal government, as one would expect, is learning as it goes, and we're trying to make sure that there is all the necessary exchange of information. I'm sure the federal government knows exactly where they're going into aged care facilities, and I would expect that information
how sure are you
will be made available. Sorry?
How sure are you they know that information? Because at the moment it seems a bit haphazard.
Look, I can't comment on that aspect, but I will say this: I think we've spent a year now in a whole new environment with no playbook. I think that we've got to give the federal government and all the state and territory governments a little bit of time, but everybody seems to be doing the best they can, and I'm quite sure that in the days and weeks to come, there'll be full information exchange between each of the federal and each of the state governments and federal governments.
These are frail, can be, have health risks attached to it, and the ongoing anxiety for elderly people being told and then cancelled and then told and then cancelled, it can get quite difficult for them.
I'm sure that the federal government is doing all it can. Certainly from the aged care point of view, I stress again that the aged care facilities are being managed in terms of the rollout of vaccine by the federal government, but of course the state government stands ready to help if necessary. But at this stage it seems that the federal government is managing the rollout. If there have been some changes and arrangements, that would not be unexpected in this very early phase, and I think that we've got to give everybody a little bit of time just to settle into what is a no playbook situation.
Can I ask the Treasurer a question?
So, yeah. Serena.
How confident are you in the state's cyber security measures? Are you confident that health data is secure?
Obviously, there have been some issues with regard to an international attack on many companies and governments around the world. And there has been an attack in terms of the health data here in New South Wales. Limited amounts, fortunately. We're still working through that. The Health Ministry is working through the extent of the breach. But I do know that the platform that was being used at that time when the attack took place has now changed. So I'm confident that whatever happened can't happen again. That's not to say that there aren't other possible attacks. Of course, we live in a cyber world, and there are criminals out there who spend every waking moment looking to find ways to hold companies and governments and departments in those governments accountable in the hope of actually causing grief.
Premier, do people have confidence handing over their personal data to the government?
Firstly, absolutely, but we also need to make sure that we're doing everything we can as governments to ensure we have plans in place to withstand those attacks, which is why we have a centralised digital authority now in New South Wales. We have Resilience New South Wales, which will also be asked to look at these issues. So there's no doubt that we are moving into a phase globally of where these attacks are becoming more frequent. Australia is not immune from this. New South Wales is not immune from this. But please know that our government is literally investing billions of dollars in building up the firewalls to make sure that any risk to our citizens is reduced.
So
Last question, please.
So when people hand over their data in an unprecedented way, they can be confident that it won't end up.
Well, I think people accept the risk, but they also accept that governments or organisations will do their best to protect that. And I think we all live in the digital age where the rules are changing. Sorry.
Treasurer, there's one restriction you refuse to budge on, is having a beer at the bar.
Now, it looks like you're caving in on this. Is that a game? There's been many game changers. Is that a game changer in this pandemic?
Well, I don't cave into anything. We have regular, robust discussions on Wednesday morning, and when I get invited here, it's generally good news for the people of New South Wales. So, unlike when Brad's here. So, so today is a great day for the people of our state, and setting a date where people can go back to the bar and have a beer standing up is a great day for the people of New South Wales. And the other thing I'd say is, these restrictions we set, and what way I think it's a very positive thing for New South Wales is, you look back at where we've gone over the last 12 months, we always knew, and we worked towards JobKeeper finishing in March. And we set a goal to have New South Wales as open as possible. And where we sit today, we are tracking towards success. And whilst we're waiting a couple more weeks for some of those final restrictions to be lifted, I think that bodes very, very well for the people of New South Wales. Our unemployment rate's at 6%. It's the lowest in mainland Australia. And we are on track, I think, to not just be dealing well with the health response, but our economy being open and providing people the freedom to live their lives is a very positive thing.
Treasurer, would pubs be disappointed today? I mean, I can have 50 people around at my house, 30 people at a time can dance at a wedding from Friday, but you can't stand up and have a drink at the front bar until...
Well, James, invite the friends over, mate, because what I would say is that this is a great result. The pubs and clubs, if you speak to them, I think have been very supportive of the approach we've taken in our state. What we don't want to do is go backwards. You look at other jurisdictions which have closed their borders. We've always acted in the national interest. Now, that means that sometimes we've had to make further sacrifices than other states, but ultimately we see ourselves as Australians first. We want to make sure we open up our economy and don't go backwards, and we've done that in a measured and balanced and proportionate way throughout the last 12 months, and I think the announcement today would be welcome, not just in pubs and clubs, but also for people like yourself who can invite your friends over.
Thanks, everyone.
Can I dance at the pub yet or not?
Look,
If there's live music, can I have a dance?
Not on the bar.
yeah, you can't, not on the bar.
Thanks, everyone.
You're shouting and no dancing at all, right, at the pub? No dance.
Thanks,
Treasurer,
everyone.
has Treasury data been compromised in this recent attack?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.